Move on to Accent or Ghost.
Cool.
This is a piece where we get Adam's view on many aspects of the drumming industry at large. And at the end, we'll get an approval, an accent, or a disapproval, a ghost. Cool, so what do you think about looking to the past to learn about playing the drums?
That's a weird one for me. Because I am one of those drummers who, when I grew up listening to drums, my interest was always in what's popular now. So like, for me, when I was in high school, it was like, what albums came out this year? What bands are like relevant and cool and modern right now? I never, ever had a phase. People are going to hate me for this. Oh, yeah. I never listened to Rush. I never listened to Zeppelin. You name the old classic band with all these parts that influenced everything we know and love. I never had a phase where I listened to them. I'd seriously, I'd have a really hard time playing a single part or recognizing a part from any of those classic bands at all. I never had this idea that that drummers like that weren't valuable. I always knew that, of course, the things that we play came from somewhere. But as far as my personal interest in rhythmic expression, it's always been more interesting to me to think about where we're going and what's being done now than to look back and say, how did we used to do it, right? And, it's one of those things, like an example I would use would be like Jimi Hendrix, right? Like, he was the first person to play licks that sounded like that. It was a brand new sound. And so he gets all of the musical street cred in the world for doing that. But if you were to hold him against, like, Mateus Asoto, who is one of the greatest modern living guitar players on earth. You just go to his Instagram, I'll put it on the screen. Absolute freak.
Yeah.
There is no question of who is technically better at guitar. That's not really up for debate here, right? But we're also talking about two different ways to value playing, right? Like, has Mateus Asoto like impacted the music industry in the same way? Like, no, probably not, right? Like, there's so very, very different values. I think when I go back in time and I watch videos of older drummers playing, without discrediting the value of their creative contributions, my lack of interest is rooted in the fact that I can watch 17 or 18-year-olds on Instagram that are technically more proficient than them. And that is, again, in no way like a knock on the skill level of drummers from 50 years ago or 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's more so just that I'm interested in the technical progression of the instrument. And of course, technically, things are progressing at a way faster rate, just like technology, now than they were a long time ago, right? And this is a product of the internet. Like, what happens when you raise a musician with access to all of the drum information in the world, all of the rhythmic information that they could ever need. When you introduce them to that at age 12 and they're raised with an iPad next to their drum set, you get a different level of musician by the time that drummer is 18 or 25 than you would have if they had to catch a bus to the music store and buy whatever book happened to be there, right? I mean, if you go pre-internet, the exchange of information was very, very different. It was much slower, right? So this is why there were less incredibly talented, proficient drummers a long time ago, right? And now it's like you just open Instagram and you see these absolute freaks, and there's more and more and more of them. I think a lot of that is the speed at which we're able to exchange information through websites like OrlandoDrummer.com. Really, it's just all the internet. It's the internet, right? So for me, because technical progression of the expression of rhythm is what I'm so interested in, it is less interesting to look backwards and sort of see the history of where things came from. But I say that having a complete understanding that there's value in doing that too. So if you're somebody who really likes to look back at, a different era of drumming and see where things came from, I don't want to make any argument that that's not a valuable thing to do. Of course, you could argue that I'm missing stuff by not doing that more often, by not knowing Rush songs or Zeppelin songs necessarily. I think it's personal preference, I think like the answer to everything, moderation is probably key. For guys that have exclusively studied drummers from the 60s, like, hey, dude, we got some pretty cool shit going on nowadays if you wanted to kind of look the other way a little bit. But you could also say that somebody like me, who has this pull towards like the progress of rhythmic expression. You know, I think somebody like me could stand to benefit from looking back a little bit, and I have some of those aha moments, like, oh, that's where that idea came from. Like, interesting. So, yeah, it's a push and pull. But personally, on a personal level, I'm gonna ghost looking back at drummers. It's just, I don't know what to say other than it doesn't personally interest me, but I would never ghost it for anybody else. Never for anybody else. If that's your interest in drumming, is looking back and studying the history of where things came from, who played what at what time, what they contributed, and who it influenced, I don't think that's a waste of your time by any stretch of the imagination. So it's just personal preference. For me, it's a ghost, but it gets an accent for anybody that wants to approach the industry that way, or not the industry, but the art form that way, you know? Cool. Yeah, good question, but tricky one for me.
Yeah. All right. So, kind of bridging the gap between accent or ghost.
Yeah, ghost for me. I'll say that. It's a ghost for me. I am so uninterested in a clip from somebody playing drums in the 70s. I'm just like, I'd rather like. Have you seen Matt Garska though? Like, you know, like that's just what my brain does. Yeah, it's totally personal though. Totally personal.
All right. Cool. So traditionalists suck. That's the note that I wrote here for the answer.
Thank you for watching this clip from the Orlando Drummer Podcast, and consider yourself formally invited to come check out my online drum school on orlandodrummer.com. Link is in the description. You can start a free 7-day trial and access over 160 hours of content, along with the largest library of drumless loops in the world. Trust me, it is a lot of good stuff, and I promise you'll find something you like. Link is in the description. I'll see you guys there.